Her husband forced her to sign a prenup, calling her gold digger. He slid the prenup across the table and said it was the only way to protect himself. He reminded her she came from nothing and accused her of waiting for his success. The word gold digger hung in the air while he watched her sign. What he never questioned was why she did it so easily, or what kind of wealth stays silent until the timing is perfect. Before we go any further, we'd love for you to hit that subscribe button. Your support means the world to us, and it helps us bring you better stories. Now, let's begin. He proposed on a quiet Sunday evening, not with fireworks or speeches, but with a folder placed between them on the kitchen table. The ring came after. The folder came first. She noticed his hands. They were steady, but his jaw tightened when she opened it. Pages clipped neatly. Legal language, a prenuptial agreement. He spoke carefully, like someone explaining a smart move. His company had just landed its first real contract. $5 million. He said success changed things. People changed. He said protection mattered now. He mentioned her background without looking at her. The way she grew up. The lack of money. The risks. He said he had worked too hard to lose everything to divorce courts and bad intentions. Gold digger was not said once. It was implied again and again. She turned the pages slowly. Her thumb paused on certain clauses. Assets before marriage. Assets after. No sharing. No exceptions. His voice kept filling the room while she read. A neighbor laughed outside. Someone's car alarm chirped and stopped. Life kept moving. She asked one question. Would there be a wedding if she did not sign? He leaned back, crossed his arms, and waited. She signed. No argument. No tears. She closed the folder and slid it back to him. Her face stayed calm, but her foot pressed lightly into the floor, a habit from long conversations where she listened more than she spoke. He smiled with relief. He kissed her forehead like the problem had been solved. That night, while he slept easily, she sat on the edge of the bed and stared at her phone. A message waited from an old family lawyer. Documents were ready. Transfers were moving forward. She locked the screen without replying and lay down beside her future husband, already understanding what kind of man he was becoming. He believed the signature ended the conversation. He did not notice how she folded the pen before placing it back and aligning it with the table edge. He did not notice how she washed her hands longer than usual, as if rinsing off something invisible. Outside, the building hummed with evening noise. A couple argued on a balcony. Someone downstairs talked loudly about money and luck. The words drifted up through the open window. She listened without reacting. She had spent her life learning when silence was safer than correction, when patience revealed more than resistance. She turned on her side, facing away from him, eyes open in the dark. The ceiling fan clicked once with each rotation. Tomorrow, he would tell people he had protected himself. Tonight, she let him believe it. The truth could wait. It always had. For now, she stayed still and listened to his breathing. Slow again. Marriage settled into routine quickly. Mornings were quiet. Evenings filled with his stories. He talked about meetings, about how people listened differently now. Success had sharpened his posture. He stood straighter. His laugh came faster. She listened while cooking, while folding laundry, while answering emails on her phone that he assumed were from work. Sometimes she nodded. Sometimes she smiled. She rarely added anything. At dinners with friends, he liked to tell the story of the deal. How close it almost did not happen. How persistence paid off. Someone joked that he had finally made it. Another asked if marriage felt safer now. He laughed and said paperwork made everything clearer. She stirred her drink and looked away. The contract had come through weeks earlier, papers signed in offices far from their apartment. Her name appeared on documents he would never see, on ownership structures shifted quietly. Old land rights passed into her hands, royalties locked into accounts that required no discussion. When the phone rang late, she stepped into the hallway. She lowered her voice. He heard fragments and assumed it was nothing important. He once asked why she still worked so much. She said habits were hard to break. That answer satisfied him. At work events, people treated her kindly, but briefly. They spoke to him longer. He liked that. He placed his hand at her back, a gesture that looked supportive but carried weight. She adjusted her stance each time, easing away without drawing attention. A colleague mentioned that the deal seemed unusually smooth, doors opening faster than usual. He shrugged and said timing mattered. She remembered sitting at a long table years earlier, watching older relatives decide who could be trusted with what. She remembered being told to wait, to observe, to let people reveal themselves fully before correcting them. One evening, he complained about risk, about how quickly things could disappear if he was not careful. He said he was glad he had been firm from the start. She asked softly if he trusted her. He paused, then said trust and protection were different things. That sentence stayed with her. Later, alone in the bedroom, she opened a folder on her laptop. Numbers filled the screen. Asset valuations. Future projections. She closed it before he came in. He kissed her and talked about expansion plans. She listened, resting her head against his shoulder, feeling the steady rhythm of his confidence grow. Outside, rain tapped against the window. Somewhere down the street, people argued about money, about fairness, about who deserved what. She did not look out. She already knew how those conversations ended. In bed, he fell asleep mid-sentence. She lay awake, counting the breaths between his snores, understanding that patience was no longer a virtue. It was preparation. His confidence hardened into habit. He began to speak as if success had always been inevitable. Meetings stretched longer. His phone stayed face down during dinner, buzzing often. When he noticed, he smiled and said growth was demanding. She watched small changes, how he interrupted more, how he corrected people publicly, how he spoke about money as something fragile that required constant guarding. At a company dinner, someone raised a glass and thanked him for the opportunity. Another joked that luck favored the prepared, but he accepted the praise easily. He did not look at her when someone asked how he managed such strong connections so early. She excused herself and stood near the window. Below, two co-workers whispered about how quickly everything had moved. One said it felt unusual. The other said not to question good fortune. Later that night, he told her he was thinking about expanding. More protection, more structure. He said success attracted attention. She asked if attention always meant danger. He replied that people wanted what they did not earn. That answer settled something inside her. Her days filled with quiet errands that were not errands at all. Brief meetings in office lobbies, documents reviewed in waiting rooms, signatures placed with deliberate care. She noticed how differently people spoke when money was old instead of new. One afternoon, she returned home earlier than expected. He was on the phone, pacing. His voice was tight. He ended the call quickly and said negotiations were stressful. She nodded and put her bag down slowly. He mentioned the prenuptial agreement again one evening, this time as a joke. He said it had been smart, necessary. He said it kept things clean. She asked what clean meant. He hesitated, then said uncomplicated. The word stayed between them. At night, she lay awake longer than before. She replayed moments, the folder on the table, the way he had waited, the relief on his face after she signed. She understood now that the agreement was never about protection. It was about control. The inheritance process moved closer to completion. Numbers firmed into certainty. Accounts prepared to unlock. She felt no rush. Timing mattered. During a small argument about money, he said he had built everything himself. He said independence mattered. She looked at him carefully and said nothing. Outside, the city buzzed with weekend noise. Music drifted up from somewhere below. Laughter, glass clinking, people celebrating things they believed would last. She stood at the sink later, washing a single cup, listening to him talk about the future. His future, his plans, his safeguards. She dried the cup and placed it upside down, aligning it neatly with the others. The habit calmed her. He believed he understood risk. He did not realize he had already revealed his greatest weakness. He thought silence meant agreement. He did not know it meant measurement. She checked her phone once before sleeping. One message waited. Final confirmation pending. She turned the screen off and closed her eyes. The truth was ready. She was not. Not yet. The confirmation arrived on an ordinary afternoon. No announcement followed it. A short message confirmed that every transfer was complete and legally sealed. The inheritance had cleared in full. She read the message, locked her phone, and continued cooking. Oil warmed in the pan. The clock on the wall ticked steadily. Nothing around her shifted, and that felt right. He arrived later than usual, energized and loud with confidence. He talked about projections, about how quickly things were moving. He poured a drink and leaned against the counter, speaking as if momentum itself belonged to him. She listened until the plates were cleared. She said she needed to tell him something. He waved it off at first and said tomorrow would be better. And she said it could not wait. They sat at the same table where the agreement had first been placed. Her hands rested flat on the surface. His fingers tapped once, then stopped. She explained carefully. Her family history. The gold mine. The decades of ownership that never appeared in public records. The legal process that had been unfolding quietly during their engagement and marriage. She stated the valuation without emphasis. $500 million. He laughed at first, then stopped when she did not react. He asked if she was serious. She said yes. He stood and paced once, then asked why she never told him. She said it never came up. His face tightened. He asked about the contract that changed his company's future. She told him how the introduction happened, who made the call, why the deal moved so fast. She spoke evenly, without correction or accusation. Silence settled between them. He opened the drawer and pulled out the prenuptial agreement. Pages flipped quickly at first, then slower. His eyes moved across clauses he had once memorized with pride. She remained seated and watched. He said the agreement was meant to protect what he built. She replied that it worked exactly as written. His company stayed his. His assets remained untouched. Every safeguard he demanded stood firm. Her assets, however, were separate, structured carefully, entirely hers. He lowered himself back into the chair. The shift did not come from tone or posture. It came from understanding. He realized the contract he trusted had never been neutral. It reflected how he saw her. She did not raise her voice. She said that respect should have come before suspicion. Outside, a car passed with loud music. Somewhere nearby, people laughed. The world continued at its usual pace. He stared at the table, then at the signature at the bottom of the document. His signature? His terms. She stood and cleared the remaining dishes, placing them in the sink with steady movements. The truth had been delivered. What followed was his to face alone. For the first time since the wedding, he had nothing to say. The days that followed were quieter. Not peaceful, just restrained. He moved through the apartment with caution, as if every object had shifted slightly out of place. Conversations became shorter. His confidence no longer filled the rooms ahead of him. She did not change her routine. She woke early. She worked. She answered calls he did not overhear anymore. Her posture stayed the same, steady and composed, like someone who had already accepted an outcome. He tried once to speak about fairness, about intentions. He said he never meant to hurt her. She listened and replied with a single sentence. Our intentions mattered less than choices. That ended the discussion. At a dinner with friends weeks later, someone congratulated him on how well things were going. He smiled, but the smile faded quickly. He glanced at her, unsure of where he stood. She met his eyes briefly, then returned to her plate. The marriage did not collapse overnight. It thinned. Trust became formal. Affection turned careful. He realized that the agreement he demanded had not only separated assets, it had drawn a line through their relationship. He had feared being used. That fear shaped every decision. In the end, it exposed him. She never used her wealth as leverage. She did not threaten him or remind him of numbers. Her restraint carried more weight than any display ever could. One evening, he asked what would have changed things. She said respect should have come before protection. Nothing more followed. He began to understand that success did not fail him. His assumptions did. He built barriers against an imagined threat and ignored the person standing beside him. She remained composed, not because she felt victorious, but because she felt clear. The silence he once mistook for agreement had always been patience. Patience had limits. The prenuptial agreement stayed in place, exactly as written. His assets remained his. Hers remained hers. The document became a permanent record of how little he trusted her when it mattered most. In the end, the power shift was not financial. It was emotional. She had already moved beyond the need to prove anything. He stayed behind, holding the protection he demanded, finally understanding the cost of building walls in the wrong direction. Subscribe for more stories where silence reveals the truth. Share your thoughts in the comments.